Think about your favorite bands, the ones that just seem to pop up on the radio totally perfect.
Yeah, like they just arrived fully formed.
Exactly. But what you probably don't realize is that behind, well, almost every one of those overnight success stories in music,
Right.
there's usually a whole uh, tangled history, people, moments, maybe some weird detours.
That's so true. That final polished track we love. Often it's the end of a really long, winding road. And, crucial bits come from people you might never even hear of.
Right. And those behind the scenes stories, they're often the most fascinating ones.
Definitely.
And today we're really diving into one of those. We're looking at the early days of Alicia's Attic, the Poole sisters, Shelley and Karen.
They made quite a splash, didn't they? Mid-90s.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Brit Award nomination, Best Newcomer in '97, loads of UK chart hits. And they had that interesting connection. Their dad was Brian Poole from the Tremolos.
Right, right.
You shared Kenny Denton's book, There Ain't No Rules in Rock and Roll, and it gives this amazing firsthand look at how it all actually kicked off.
Exactly. And look, there are different stories floating around about how Alicia's Attic got their record deal. But Kenny Denton, he was right there, like boots on the ground at the very beginning, played a massive part in shaping their early sound.
So our mission today really is to dig into his side of the story, his experiences, uncover those crucial steps that led to their first big break.
Yeah, it's a chance to see how those foundations were actually laid beyond the headlines.
Okay, let's get into it then. Kenny Denton's first link to Shelley and Karen Poole, that came through Laurie J. Now, Laurie J., he wasn't just anyone, was he? Serious music critic.
Oh, absolutely serious. Laurie J's background is, frankly, incredible.
Yeah.
He drummed for just iconic names, the Shadows, the Echoes, Dusty Springfield,
Wow.
Chuck Berry, Gene Vincent, Jerry Lee Lewis, even led his own band, the Laurie J Combo.
Okay, so a proper legend.
Totally. And then later he moved into management, handled people like Elkie Brooks, Billy Ocean, Shirley Bassey. Big names.
Right. So when someone like Laurie J spots talent, you listen.
You definitely listen. It carries a lot of weight.
So Laurie J's involved adds that credibility. What was the actual deal he proposed to Denton?
Well, Laurie went to Denton and basically said, look, produce some tracks for these girls, Alicia's Attic. The main goal was just getting demos good enough to maybe snag a record deal.
Okay.
And the sort of potential bonus, the carrot, was if a label bit, Denton might get to produce the whole album.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. But Denton also notes, interestingly, that Laurie had this reputation for being challenging to work with.
Challenging how, though? Like creative differences or business stuff?
Denton doesn't spell it out entirely,
Mm-hmm.
but you get the vibe of someone with, very strong opinions, a firm way of doing things.
Gotcha.
But Denton also respected Laurie's ear for talent, and they'd worked together before, so he said yes.
Okay, so Denton's in. Then he meets Shelley and Karen. And that first meeting sounds like it really clicked.
It really did. Denton describes this like immediate connection. They just hit it off personally, talking easily about music, life, all that stuff.
That's often key in creative things, isn't it?
Absolutely. That instant rapport can be really powerful. And there's this interesting bit where Denton mentioned a recent bad experience he'd had with a Cajun artist he was producing.
Mm-hmm.
And Karen was apparently really empathetic, really understanding about it. Denton kind of flags this looking back,
Yeah.
almost like it foreshadowed things.
Yeah, he mentions wishing he'd said something like, in a few years, the tables will turn. That's quite a statement.
It really is. Tells you a lot about how he felt later.
But musically, at that point, those first demos weren't exactly chart toppers waiting to happen.
No. Denton's pretty blunt about it. He calls them noticeably amateurish.
Okay.
But here's the crucial part, right? Despite that rawness, one particular song, Natural Thing, really jumped out at him.
Okay, so he heard something.
Exactly. And that really shows Denton's skill, doesn't it?
Yeah.
His ability to hear the potential hidden inside a ref recording.
Right. Spotting the diamond in the rough. So he hears Natural Thing and decides to bring in Danny Saxon.
Yes. Danny Saxon. Absolutely vital at this stage.
What was Danny's specific expertise? What did he bring, technically speaking?
Danny Saxon was a really skilled music programmer. Now, back then, music programming was all about using those early digital tools, sequencers, samplers,
Right.
to shape sounds, create drum patterns, basically build the whole sonic architecture of a track.
Yeah.
And he and Denton went way back.
Oh.
Yeah, worked together loads on projects with Anthony Newley, even Peter Green from Fleetwood Mac. And Danny was key on those Cajun recordings Denton mentioned.
Okay, so they had history, and Danny had the technical chops.
Definitely. He could take those raw song ideas and really sculpt them into something polished.
But Denton had to level with him about the money situation, right? Because there wasn't much of a budget.
No, basically none at all for this initial demo stuff.
Yeah.
Denton pitched it to Danny, mentioning Lori J's involvement, the potential for a deal later on.
And Danny's reaction?
Well, understandably, a bit skeptical at first, given their friendship and track record, though.
He trusted Denton's instincts.
Exactly. That trust seems key. He agreed to work on Natural Thing, essentially for free, banking on the future possibility. That says a lot about their relationship.
And it paid off initially. Their work on Natural Thing, Denton says everyone was really pleased.
Yeah, genuine satisfaction is the phrase he uses. A real sense of accomplishment.
Then radio silence. For almost a year. That seems weird after hitting a high note.
It does, doesn't it? The momentum just seemed to evaporate. Denton says contact was sporadic at best. Then, out of the blue, Karen calls. The sisters come to see him again. They're frustrated with their management situation, apparently, and really keen to record some new stuff.
Which leads to the next batch of demos.
Right.
And these ones were recorded by Karen's boyfriend, Terry, on a 4-track cassette machine. Just remind us, what are the limitations there?
Oh, yeah, 4-track cassette. I mean, you've literally got just 4 separate tracks to record onto a standard cassette tape.
So not much room to layer things or fix mistakes.
Exactly. It's incredibly basic compared to professional studio gear. So, yeah, Denton described the quality as, well, pretty rudimentary.
Okay, so again, not great sound quality. But Denton still heard something promising.
He did. Despite the lo-fi sound, he recognized what he called a spark of something special in the actual songs.
Any specific examples?
Yeah, he points to the lyric, "Dreaming with a capital D," from the song Toy Box. Said it really grabbed him.
Ah, okay. So his belief in their songwriting was still there.
Absolutely, even if the recordings themselves were rough.
So back to Denny Saxon again. How did that conversation go? Danny must have been thinking, hang on, I did the last one for free.
You're right. His reaction wasn't exactly jumping for joy. He'd already put in unpaid time on Natural Thing.
Yeah.
Denton really had to sell it to him again. Emphasized his gut feeling like, look, I really think we're close to getting a deal this time.
And Danny.
Showed incredible loyalty, really. Agreed to work on these new tracks, again, without any upfront payment. His faith at this point seems to have been purely in Denton and their shared goal.
Okay, so now they've got these raw but promising new songs. What was the actual process of polishing them up? Denton mentions being ruthless.
Yeah, he describes it as needing to trim the fat, basically. Cutting out unnecessary bars, tightening up lines in the songs and lyrics.
So the basic ideas were good, but they needed structure.
Exactly. Needed to be more concise, more impactful. It's pretty standard in song development, really. You often need that outside ear to help shape things.
And how did Shelley and Karen take that kind of feedback?
Apparently, quite well. Denton says they were quite content with the guidance. They seemed to recognize the songs needed that refinement.
That shows a good willingness to learn, I guess.
It does. Suggests trust in Denton's experience. So they worked on them and ended up with 3 polished tracks: Toy Box, Alisha Rules the World, and Air We Breathe.
Okay, those became key songs, and then they focused heavily on the vocals, right? Especially the harmonies.
Yes, massively important. Danny Saxon was apparently brilliant here. He arranged the harmonies really skillfully to give them a unique sound.
How so?
Making sure they didn't just sound like, a copy of other big female duos at the time, like Wilson Phillips, giving them their own distinct flavor.
And the lead vocals.
Denton spent a lot of time coaching them on that, really pushing them to connect emotionally with the words to make the listener believe them.
He makes a distinction, doesn't he, between just being technically good and really conveying feeling.
He does. He contrasts a cabaret singer, someone technically proficient but maybe lacking depth, with a great singer who truly believes the lyrics and makes the audience believe too. A crucial lesson.
Okay, so now they've got these 3 really strong, polished tracks. What was the plan? How do you get them heard?
Denton's advice was strategic. He told Shelley and Karen to approach the record companies personally.
Rather than through management initially.
Yeah, and he helped them put together a killer package, a really well-written letter, professional photos, and a cassette tape, but, and this is clever with only 1 song on it, Natural Thing.
Ah, the teaser strategy.
Exactly. Pique the interest of the A&R people. Those are the talent scouts at the labels. Make them curious, create demand to hear the rest, leave them wanting more. Classic move.
And did it work? Did the A&R folks bite?
Oh yeah, pretty quickly. Denton talks about spending ages on the phone with Shelley and Karen, often late at night.
Coaching them through it.
Yeah, giving advice, encouragement, helping them handle those initial calls and meetings with the labels. It sounds like he was a real support system during that hectic time.
Which must have been exciting, but probably terrifying too.
Absolutely.
And it sounds like, at this point anyway, Shelley and Karen really valued what Denton and Danny had done.
It seems so. Denton specifically recalls this BBQ at his house. And the girls and Terry, Karen's boyfriend, were apparently adamant, saying, look, you and Danny are just as much Alicia's addict as we are.
Wow, that's strong acknowledgement.
Yeah, seemed like genuine appreciation for all the effort they'd poured in.
But then, things took a turn. The professional relationship started to break down. It began when the girls asked Denton to manage them.
That's right. As all this label interest was heating up, they asked him if he'd be their manager.
And he said,
Wisely, he recognized that wasn't his area of expertise. Production, yes. Management, no. So he advised them to get proper professional representation.
sensible advice.
Yeah, told them to meet a few managers, find someone they clicked with, and then let them know who they chose.
And they narrowed it down to 2 candidates. What made Denton lean towards Paul White?
Well, one manager they were considering already had a big stable of successful artists. Paul White, on the other hand, had managed a successful duo before, but was kind of rebuilding his roster.
So Denton figured White would give them more focus.
Exactly his thinking. That Alicia's attic would likely be his main priority, get his undivided attention, rather than potentially being just another act on a crowded list.
And they took his advice.
They did. They went with Paul White.
Which leads to the meeting. At Denton's studio with Paul White, Denton probably expected to talk about finishing the album, right?
You'd think so, but that's not quite how it went down.
What happened?
White comes in and announces he's secured this big publishing deal for them, with EMI worth £125,000, a hefty sum then.
Wow, okay.
And that there was a serious record deal offer from Mercury Records on the table, too. Things were definitely happening.
Sounds great so far.
Right. Then came the curveball. White says, okay, to finalize all this on my terms, we need 3 more tracks produced.
Right. Makes sense.
But then he offers Denton and Saxon, wait for it, a total of just £600 for all 3 tracks.
£600
Combined.
for 3 full productions after all the unpaid work they'd already done.
Insulting, almost.
It certainly seems incredibly low, yeah. Especially with those big deals looming.
How did Denton and Saxon react?
Well, astonishingly, they were still willing to do the work. They'd put so much in already. Their only request was basically some kind of assurance from White.
Assurance about what?
That he'd genuinely try to make sure at least 2 of their already finished polished songs, like Alisha Rules the World or Air We Breathe, would actually made it onto the final album. That seems reasonable. Give them some credit for the work already done.
You'd think. But White just flat out refused. No promises whatsoever.
Seriously. Just wouldn't budge.
Nope. Denton brings up White's earlier comment about finalizing the deal on his terms, suggesting, maybe including their tracks could be part of those terms.
Good point.
But White's response was just blunt. £600, and that's my final offer.
Yeah.
It really felt like a complete dismissal of their contribution up to that point.
Ouch. That must have stung.
Massively. And it's right then that Karen Poole apparently pipes up with this really telling comment, something like, God feels like we're giving everything away now for peanuts.
She saw it, too.
Seems like it. And Denton uses this analogy. Like they'd baked this amazing cake, done all the hard work,
Yeah.
and now they weren't even being offered the crumbs. Just totally shut out as the deals were being signed.
Wow. That paints a really clear, painful picture.
It really does. And sadly, according to Denton, that meeting, that was the absolute last time he ever saw or spoke to Shelley or Karen.
Just like that. End of the road.
It's just like that.
So what happened to those original recordings? The ones Denton and Saxon poured all that effort into? Did they just disappear?
Well, after the Mercury deal was done, Denton actually asked the label if they'd be interested in buying his multi-track masters.
The original tapes.
Yeah. But Mercury's legal team, totally uninterested. They basically told him the tapes were useless to them and warned him not to use them himself because there was no formal written agreement with the band about usage rights.
The lack of a contract?
Exactly. Denton really kicks himself over that. Says he should have learned his lesson from that earlier Cajun artist situation and gotten something down on paper with Shelley and Karen. A painful mistake.
And Danny Saxon's role in all this. Denton really emphasizes his contribution, doesn't he? Especially regarding Alisha Rules the World.
Oh, absolutely. Denton calls Danny's work genius, basically, for how he took their raw ideas and made them shine.
High praise.
And he feels it's kind of proven by what happened later. When Dave Stewart, Eurythmics' Dave Stewart, produced his hit version of Alisha Rules the World,
Yeah.
Denton claimed Stewart essentially copied specific elements directly from their original demo version. Things like the string lines, specific instrument sounds, even guitar riffs.
Really? So their arrangement was that strong?
It strongly suggests the quality and originality of what Denton and Saxon had created.
Yeah.
Denton even reckons Stewart's version of Air We Breathe wasn't as good as it could have been because he didn't follow their original arrangement as closely.
Interesting. So hearing Alisha Rules the World everywhere later on must have been tough for Denton.
Yeah, he calls it a painful reminder every single time it came on the radio.
I bet.
But he stresses the deeper pain wasn't just the missed opportunity,
Hmm.
It was feeling like they'd been, well, used
Yeah,
by people they thought were friends, collaborators.
that personal aspect.
That betrayal of trust, that seems to be what hurt the most.
And he felt the girls kind of forgot about those early days, the help they got.
Yeah, there's definitely a sense of disappointment there, that maybe they overlooked the value of that guidance, those lessons Denton and Saxon shared in the beginning.
Hmm.
He even suggests that if they'd maybe held on to those lessons, applied them more consistently, maybe their success could have been even bigger, more sustained.
A what-if scenario.
Exactly. It's quite a poignant reflection on how messy the music business can be, how easily those early creative bonds can break. He finishes his account with that famous James Brown quote,
Which one?
"I taught them everything they know, but not everything I know."
Oof. Yeah, that says a lot about how he views the whole thing.
It really does. Sums up his perspective pretty powerfully.
So, wow, this deep dive into Kenny Denton's story, it really pulls back the curtain, doesn't it? Shows those complex, sometimes really unfair realities behind what looks like a simple success story from the outside.
Totally. It's one of those aha moments, for sure.
Yeah.
What you see on the surface in music is almost never the full picture.
Yeah, and it really highlights the absolutely crucial role of people like Kenny Denton and Danny Saxon, these often unseen collaborators.
The ones doing the groundwork, shaping things early on. It really makes you think about how important it is to actually acknowledge and value those initial contributions.
It definitely does. Makes you wonder, doesn't it? How often does that first creative spark, that initial vision, just get kind of swallowed up or forgotten when the big success hits later?
Yeah, and what are the ethics around that? Especially in creative industries. It's a tricky area.
Definitely something to chew on. Thanks for unpacking this, it was. Well, fascinating and, yeah, pretty sobering in parts, too.
My pleasure. It's quite a story.
And for you listening, maybe next time you hear your favorite song, think about it. Think about the unseen hands, the hidden stories that might have helped bring it into the world. Success is rarely a solo performance.